different software, if you would, a Microsoft Schedule or a Microsoft Project, to make sure that everything would be synchronized to a way that they wouldn't experience cost overruns, or going over budget. So I like the way you put that. So a leader focuses on people, and a manager focuses on resources.
Yeah. It was interesting when I was working for this international company. There was one manager that it surprised me that he lived. I mean, he was a brilliant guy. He very good organizer, very good project leader, and it always surprised me he made it back to his car in the parking lot without getting mugged by his own employees. He was the most hated guy in the entire building, and yet he was a manager, There was another fellow, and this guy, I'll mention his first name, Bill, and he unfortunately passed away at a very young age, high-level manager, He was the most effective leader that I've ever worked with, or I get worked for. But I think if I said worked with, he would be angry. I think if he's listening to me right now, he's getting angry right now. No, I worked with him. He never took placed himself above anyone else. If he knew I came from New York, and this was back in the Archie Bunker days. Remember the old program with Archie Bunker and
Yeah.
And remember? And he used to just recant, the previous night's episode with me because he loved the program. But he always placed himself on the same level with everyone else. And he was such a great leader. I'll tell you what he did one time. He promoted me into to run an entire order center for a region. This was a big job. Most guys literally got sick in the job. It was such a high-pressure job, most guys couldn't do it. And I wasn't even experienced in that field. And I told him, I said, thank you, but I'd love to do it, but I'm qualified. He said, I think you can do it. Well, after 3 weeks in that job, I realized I couldn't do this job. I was going to fail big time, and no product was going to get shipped anywhere. And I went to his office. This is the God's honest truth. I went all the way downtown to the office, went upstairs to the 43rd floor, and said, Bill, I want to thank you for the opportunity, but, I don't think I can do this. When I explained why. And he stood there. He said, thank you. And I looked at him. I said, well, did I lose my job? Do I get transferred out? He said, no. He said, go back to work. I said, I don't think you understood what I just said. He said, I understood what you said. He said, Joe, let me tell you something. If you came in here and told me how well you were doing in that job, he said, I would have removed you. He said, it is a difficult job. You outlined it perfectly. Now get to work. You're going to be a success. And and that guy was right. I had the best order center in the country. And, I started out not knowing anything about it. But this guy was a true leader and a phenomenal manager, both at the same time. Very unusual person. Unfortunately, just a few months after that, he passed away of a heart attack, and he was a young guy, unfortunately. And he was loved by everyone. And yet, there are some people who, and I've known this guy, his first name was Al, right? If you work for him, boy, you were under his thumb. You were lower than him, and you listened to what he had to say. Everyone disliked him, Yeah. And so, people have misconceptions, and yet when you allow people to operate the way they want to operate, but you're there with them, you're supporting them, that's one of the signs of a good leader. In fact, I read an article recently. It says five characteristics of good leadership. It says, of obviously effective communication skills. The person has to be authentic. This guy Bill was authentic. You have to be enthusiastic. He was enthusiastic about everything. Accountability. When something goes wrong, I love to blame everybody. I love to blame my cat and my dog for everything that goes wrong. But unfortunately, usually I screwed up, Accountability, taking that accountability and being ethical and responsible. And I think that's a good starting point. And but we see so many people who are managers, and they construe being a manager with being the boss, meaning they tell people what the heck to do, and they better do it or they're out.
Yeah, and that's why in today's corporate environment, the major reason why employees leave the firms or quit, it's because of their managers, and it's usually not about pay or not about anything else, but because they can't get along with their managers. Now I know Dr. Beeman is on there. She can't hear me, but I think she can hear you. Just want to give her a chance to comment.
Dr. Beeman, would you like to make a comment about what I just said and what George said? Is she on the line?
She's on Skype. I don't know if she can hear our conversation.
Oh, she can. Okay, we're still having a problem. How come?
All right, no, well,
Weird.
Okay. Well,
it's all right. I mean,
we lost her
so
somehow. Okay.
So there's two things that you talked about that are very interesting. So that was a very good article, you know. So those are attributes, traits, if you would,
Yes.
okay, that a leader should have and must have, okay. So what should a leader be? You know, a leader should have integrity. A leader should be punctual. A leader should be honest. A leader should be ethical. You know, a leader should be moral. You know, a leader should be accountable. These are all good traits and attributes that we have come to expect for leaders to have. Now, there's different kinds of leadership styles, but the way we started the conversation on leadership versus management, you know, it's not that I want to pin them against each other, but I just want to make the distinction that there are two different, you know, science or art, if you would, because leadership is an art. It's artistic, if you would, and also it is scientific. However, you know, leadership, you know, if I was going to really, you know, kind of relate to this conversation, I would just say leader is responsibility. You know, so I like the way you described it. When a leader, you know, fails, he accepts responsibility. He doesn't blame the cat. You know, he doesn't shift blame. I was in a conversation for about 2 hours this week or last week with the president of an organization that has about 160 people in it, and she was really struggling big time, you know, with her senior staff. Because she's basically, you know, come to that position recently, and she's a people's person, but she's just not a confrontational person. So instead of, you know, confronting people and saying, no, we're going to do this differently because I have a different vision for the future, you know, she became so stressed out because some of the other senior staff just get, you know, kind of running roughshots over her and getting away with it, you know, because she looked at them and trusted them to have the, you know, the organizational experience or the institutional experience to trust them, but the things that they were doing just weren't working, you know. And so we talked about some of the things that you described it a few minutes ago, and she acknowledged that she doesn't have to be confrontational, but you do have to hold people accountable. You have to hold yourself accountable first. And the way to do that, the way that I have found to do that is, you know, you have to know what the standards are. So if you know what the policies of your company are, and your policies and the standards of the organization, you know, are not in any way in misalignment with your own, and you're both in alignment, as long as you understand what those policies are, then you can hold people accountable. You know, I've often shared with the leaders that, you know, every time you walk by somebody that is, you know, making an infraction, okay, or breaking, you know, one of the policies, what you've done is you just created a new standard, you know, because you didn't confront it, you didn't check it on the spot. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to dress somebody down, spit in their face, yell at them in front of everybody and embarrass them. You know, it just means that you have to stop what you're doing, you have to focus on that individual, you have to say, look, there's a better way of doing something. You know, and I promise you that if you admonish people with respect, if you treat them with respect and you call them out, you know, in a quiet manner where they're not embarrassed about, you know, when they're doing something not, you know, within policy, they will remember you forever.
Right.
And they will remember you kind, just like you remember your boss that never wanted to be called boss, you know, because he never thought of himself more than he should have, and he never looked at you as a resource. He looked at you as a teammate, you know, and that's the difference. So you know, again, when I go back to the leadership, a lot of times we get really, really happy about the titles that we have, you know, and all of a sudden, you know, I gave my business card to somebody the other day, and she goes, "Oh, you're a big guy." I'm like, well, no, not really. Because I think the car said chief executive or something. I don't know. It had a title on it that people put on my cards, and I looked at it. I said, "Oh well, thank you, but no, I don't. No, I'm just like you." That's because people perceive it. They see you in these positions, and they make these assumptions, and that's something to remember as well, for both leaders and for managers. I mean, leaders are always on the spotlight, which means you're always being judged, and usually not because of what you're saying, but because of what you're doing, by the behavior that you're modeling. And I want to touch on one more thing, Joe, because I know we're almost out of time, but I really want to touch on something that you touched, and I think you're absolutely right. Those that have the leadership skills and also the management skills are very rare.
Right.
They're two different skills, and those that have it, if you're the chief executive of a company and you walk by one of the cubicles in your company and you notice that, one of the staff members is having some trouble putting together a PowerPoint, presentation, and you look at her and you say, well, what's the matter? She goes, well, I don't know how to do this. You say, okay, well, let me sit next to you. And if you can teach her how to do it, if you can spend 10 minutes saying, well, let me tell you what I learned. This is some of my management skills. I can use this stuff too. Well, you just took the time to really show that individual, that you're not just the leader, but you're also a person that can manage and has those skills. And that goes for a long way. When you allow somebody else's need to interrupt your daily schedule in a way that you can add value to what they do. But you got to have those skills. And not everybody does. And I think those leaders that do are fantastic and a lot more influential, in the business environment.
It's unfortunate that it appears that we align leadership with the military, and the ball game is much different there. I mean, when the colonel or the general or whomever's in charge says charge,
yeah.
or shoot or whatever, you're obliged to do so, and we seem to almost idolize those people who have won battles, for example, even if it costs thousands of lives on both sides and whatever. But we say, well, he was a strong leader. And I think some of that, and sometimes that's necessary in battle, unfortunately, but we seem to take some of those attributes and bring them into the marketplace, into the business world, and they really don't apply whatsoever. I mean, you don't do something at any cost, obviously, but maybe at war sometimes you do, although I abhor war in the first place, But it seems that we align mostly with that, and we don't align it more with people working with others and just basically taking the responsibility for the end result, not for the action itself. That's the trick.
Yeah. So yeah, in business, as in war or in the military, the way you put it, leadership is essential. So the leadership skills that many of our servicemen and women have are transferable, into the business world.
Yeah.
Part of how those skills are transferred has to deal with, the mission of the organization and how cohesive those teams are. Because one of the reasons why the military is so effective, within their leadership approach, is because they are mission focused and they are cohesive teams. But you're right about one thing: their level of authority is different. And once a mission has been, articulated, then there's no more time to argue about it. It's just time to support, whatever that mission is. But if you think about those concepts and you bring them into your business world, and you can begin to think about, every day that I'm coming to work, my mission today is to get this done, and I'm going to do this, the best way that I can, following the established guidelines of the organization. It's a good attitude to have, but in the business world, we're not in the habit of, seizing objectives and eliminating the enemy, from the face of the earth. We're into creating more customers, not killing them.
Right. Well, it's unfortunate that in many companies, the people at the lowest levels are the people that are interfacing with the ultimate consumer, the people that upper management are trying to attract into the company. And the people at the lowest level are the ones that are face-to-face on a daily basis with the customer, the person they're trying to bring into the, to buy the product or use the service. And yet, they are giving less orientation and less time and less appreciation for that connectivity with the ultimate consumer than people higher up who never even speak to a customer or come near to it.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that leadership and management skills probably should be taught at the lowest levels in the company.
Yeah, there should be. And some companies do it well, to be honest with you. Other companies don't do it at all. I mean, it depends on, how much value they think that type of training, would add to their bottom line. So some companies do it well, and some companies just don't do it at all, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, George, we're just about out of time. We want to thank you very much for being here today on your Executive Exchange Radio. And would you please tell our listeners, how they may reach you, where your website, the telephone number, or whatever you'd like to impart to them.
Yeah, we have a website that people can go to, and it's www.bmocgroup.com, or you can call us at 888-720-6996.
As soon as I can. Thank you.
Okay, George. Well, is that it?
Yeah, that's it. That's
okay.
great.
I didn't know if you were going to say anything else.
We'll do it again in 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. Folks, thank you for listening in on Executive Exchange Radio with George Gutierrez. Unfortunately, Dr. Jennifer Beeman, we lost a connection with her. There must be something wrong with the board or the lines or something like that. But we'll be back in 2 weeks, I guess you can subscribe to their program if you go to their website, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much for joining us.
Welcome to Executive Exchange Radio with moderator Joe Cristiano, America's corporate exorcist. Hosted by Dr. Jennifer Beeman and George Gutierrez, trusted advisors to chief executives and business leaders across the nation. If you would like to add to the conversation, call 646-652-4620.